Benjamin Jeffrey.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. Yes, thank you. That was very polite of you. Amazing. So we're just going to jump straight into this. So I'm going to invite Mark and Beth to come and join me. But yes. Grab a seat, guys. We wanted high stools, but we only had two, and so we had to decide whether I would sit down lower than everyone else or whether we'd all go for this height. So hopefully you can see us all okay. But this is a bit of an experiment for us. We don't normally do this. If this is your first time in church, normally there's one person doing like a sermon or a talk on a topic. But we felt that there was some bigger topics in culture and in the church that would be worth having more of like a discussion around them. And so as Emma said, we've had all of these different ideas, but the big now topic for us at Soul City is change. And whether you are the kind of person who loves change or hates change, change is inevitable, right? It's coming, and we have to know how to deal with change. And for us as a church, we're going to be changing venues, we're changing location. And to some people, that might seem like a really small thing. And to other people, that might seem like a huge deal. And so we all approach change and think about change in different ways. So what we want to do is we just want to have a chat. And this might work brilliantly, and in which case we'll do this more. This might be a disaster, in which case we'll be over there at the end for ministry time, and there's some prayer ministry, and you can come and join us as we are being prayed for. But that's the topic of the day, is change. And I think that it is a big topic because I think that change is really, really challenging to navigate. I mean, some change we love, like that change that you go to the gym and you become buff, like I want that change. But the kind of change, I've never experienced that change. I've longed for it. I've heard rumors of it. I don't know how to get there. But I think that there's other changes which are less positive. And the story that I just want to start with, and then we're going to have a chat, that I always go to when I think about change is the story of Noah and the flood. And it's probably a story that you all know. We put it on nursery walls. We don't normally put the dead bodies in the water in the nursery walls bit, but we draw the nice fluffy animals and the crocodile sticking up at an angle out of the boat. But if you really know the story of Noah, he builds this ark. They have a flood. A population of the earth is decimated, destroyed. He spends not just 40 days and 40 nights. He's on that boat for months, right, before he gets off. And he manages to get through change. But then the final story we hear about Noah is he's in a vineyard. He ends up then making lots of wine, getting completely wasted, falling asleep naked, and then everyone comes and makes fun of him. And it's a really strange end to the story of somebody who should be a giant of the faith, right? But the warning for me in the story is that Noah never successfully managed to process the pain of the change. He went through immense change, and he came out the other side, and he needed to know how to process it well. And so I sometimes wonder for us, do we know how to process change? Do we know how to navigate it well? So that's what we're going to talk about. Hopefully there'll be some stuff which is helpful for you. Hopefully there's some situations in your life, like beyond the church, that you think that this could work. But let's just start jumping in and talking about change. So firstly, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Mark. If you don't know Mark and Beth, as I said, they're both on the leadership team at Soul City. They're friends of ours, and I think that they're people who have a lot of wisdom and insight. But my first question, Beth is somebody who I think has a lot of wisdom and insight, and I needed to make it gender inclusive, so we invited Mark up as well. But I wonder, how do you find naturally that you deal with change, and what would be like a story or an example from your life where you've gone through a big change? I don't mind who wants to jump in first.
I can go. So my natural characteristic, I think, as a person is I actually quite enjoy change. The idea of change when something, it is a positive change, particularly, is something that excites me. It energizes me. I'm somebody who tends to get a bit dragged down by the mundane, or if something feels quite stable. I'm actually, I'm one of those weird people that really loves moving house. I love packing. I love changing my environment, and my friends know me well to move my living room around often into new configurations because I get a bit bored very quickly. So change is normally quite a positive thing. For us as a family, we made a huge change about 12 years ago. We felt from God that it was right for us to leave the south coast where we were living at the time and move to Manchester, a city that Steve had been to the football stadium, and I had been in the city.
Which one?
To United. I apologize if that's a bad thing. I just like to put it out there. I've been to neither, so I don't know if that's better or worse. But I've been to Manchester for one night for work, and that was our total sum idea of what Manchester was like. But this exciting new, big, scary, but kind of intensely exciting experience was about to happen. Our kids were like 3 years old. We had no family. We had friends who were moving up as well. We were moving to help start a church, but they hadn't come yet. So we kind of landed in Manchester, not even knowing where Tesco's was, which is a big deal, isn't it? That's the point when I think that the move for us, that's the point when change gets a bit scarier for me. The whole initial build, the excitement, the going, the doing it, the thinking about it, putting into it, that's all brilliant. And then the rubber hits the road and you're doing it, and that's probably where it kicks in.
Brilliant. How about you, Mark? How do you find that you naturally react to change, and kind of what's the story from you?
So I think when it comes to change, I've kind of a bit of a mixed feeling on it.
Is that mic working?
No?
Is it on?
Green. Does that mean it's on?
Christopher Clark, can you help us?
Hello?
Yeah.
Is that working?
Yeah.
So I've kind of a bit of a mix to it. So I think on the one hand, my job is a business improvement manager. My job is to bring change. So I kind of like it to some degree. I describe myself as an early adopter. So a lot of my work is in technology and things like that. So I have an imperative to change, and I do like it. But I think I'm also quite nervous about change, particularly when there's some element of lack of control, or maybe control's more of the key word there. I find unstructured change quite tricky. So what I recommend as well, part of preparing for this is I spent a bit of time sort of writing down all the big life changes that had happened in my life, which is really interesting. So I'd encourage you to, one thing, go away today, just maybe have a think about all the things where you've had big change and just reflect on it, because it's fascinating. But the one I picked is quite similar. I kind of want to put you in my shoes for it. So I was in my mid-20s in Heathrow, where I was working for DHL, for British Airways, doing their short-haul catering. I had a big operation there that I was responsible for. I'd married my wife, Jo. We'd had our first child. We wanted to move up north, so quite similar about the journey up north. And an opportunity came up in Manchester. So it was quite a tricky transition work-wise, but I ended up moving to work on what's called like ground handling for aircraft. So when you come back from your holiday, you're still in your plane. The plane sort of parks up in the stand. Everything from that point on is a sort of a ground handling contract, and that was what I was now responsible for at Manchester for EasyJet as an operations manager. And so that is actually quite different to catering, which is not an important detail, but catering happens off-site. It's not even on the airport, but you're just packing carts. And so I arrived at the Clayton Hotel at Manchester Airport, and I didn't know anything about ground handling, and I just moved up, as I say, from the south to the north. And I remember coming into this kind of foyer area of the Clayton, and I'd been told to sort of go there and basically join a training course about ground handling, what it means. What do you do when a plane arrives? Do you walk up to it? No, is the answer, because its engines are on, right? But I didn't know all of these details, and they said, speak to the trainers. And I was looking around, and this room was filled with, 20 to 30 people who were incredibly experienced operators on the airport who, knew everything. And I didn't. And I was also this southerner, so everyone has called my voice posh, So I felt very, very like stuck out there in that moment. And I remember saying, you know, who's the trainers? Who do I speak to? And they said, oh, it's Matt and Andy, those two over there. And I mean, I kid you not, they're both at least 6'3", like absolutely massive guys. And I sort of go up to them and sort of look up and go, hello, I'm the new operations manager. But I don't even know how any of the ground handling works. And it was a very, very hard transition. I mean, I sort of play it in a bit of a funny light now, but I joined a management team that should have been 6, but was 8. You know, that immediately puts real cost pressure on my environment. And I found it very, very difficult. And I actually developed like a skin condition. I don't know whether people know about psoriasis, but you basically get covered in spots. It's a sort of genetic disease, but it usually gets triggered by stress. So I was under immense stress. But the reason I kind of wanted to use that story is because there were kind of 2 topics that I think we'll kind of explore as we go through, which is about managing change. And one of them is about your identity. And I remember every day I would listen to a sermon on the way, the drive from here to Manchester Airport, and I'd listen to a sermon every day. And then from my parking spot, I had about 10, 15 minutes to get to work, and I would just pray. And I would ask for help every day because I found it so intense. And I think it's about your identity. You know, if you can hit change and have a sure identity of who you are in Christ, that gives you a chance. And I think the second thing is about kind of vision and where you're going. So, you know, I moved up north for 2 reasons. You know, 2 reasons were important. One was I wanted to be in aviation, which is great, and my job was in that, even if it was hard. But secondly, I wanted to be up north with my family, where my wife comes from, and that's where we wanted to be. And so that was kind of giving me a bit of a surety that, even though it's hard now, I'm going somewhere. There was a purpose to it. There was a reason that I was kind of enduring this period, because you never quite know what's going to happen. So I think, you know, that was I wanted to share that one because it brought those 2 themes that I think are really important with change.
Yeah, it's really good. And I mean, I was thinking about, as you were just sharing, I was thinking about how I think of myself as somebody who loves change. Like, I naturally will, when I'm walking anywhere, I never walk the same route twice if I can help it. I'll always find another route because I love variety. I love doing things in different ways. You know, they talk about don't reinvent the wheel. I'm like, do reinvent the wheel because the wheel's boring. Like let's find different things to do. And so I always think of myself as being someone who loves change and embraces change. But then at the same time, the other day, we had a day off, I think, and I had decided in my head that I was going to do some woodwork down in the cellar, and Emma had decided that we were going to go out with her family to a swimming pool. And because I got my head stuck in this is what I'm doing with my day, when she then dropped the bombshell of we're going with your family, I suddenly realized I hate change. I hate when my plans change because woodwork is way more fun than going into a paddling pool with the in-laws. Like, let's be honest. And so suddenly I found myself like stuck with the not wanting to change. And it made me realize that you can love change or you can hate change. And it's not actually the change that's the problem. It's how we see the change. And thinking about what you're saying about some of those things like identity and vision, it made me wonder how much vision can be a double-edged sword. That you have a vision of where you thought your life was going, or you have a vision of what you thought God was going to do with you. And then what do you do when the change doesn't line up with the vision and the expectations? And what does that look like? And I wonder if you've got any thoughts or any experience around that when you thought your life was going A, B, C, and then all of a sudden it goes A, B, J, and it's not what's that like, and how do we navigate some of those challenges? What do you think?
I think, is that one not? Oh, it is? Oh, yeah. Brilliant. Yes.
Keep going and he'll boost it.
Amazing. So it's hard, isn't it? I mean, I think it's anything that we feel like we've derailed on, something where we feel like we had a way forward, we had a plan. I am a massive planner. I like planning. I like being in sort of like in control. I like knowing where something's going to go. I like it being new. I like it being different. I like variety. I like that kind of stuff. But I still like to feel like the plan is out working. I know that my first ever prophecy that I ever got, like somebody sort of got a word of God for me, was, and it was like, define the rest. It was, you're standing at a door and you're pushing on that door, but it's a pull door. And it's like, God's like, just pull the door. Because sometimes we really try and take over. We're like, okay. And I'm brilliant at doing this where I've got the vision, like, great, yes, I've got it. Okay, I'll take it. I'll run off. That's fine. I've got it now. I'm all excited. You're in that sort of first, wave of new excitement and this new idea. And right, okay, I've got it. I've got all the plan. I know what you wanted to do, God. That's brilliant. I'll go get that done. And I run off with it, and I go and try and get it done. And then you hit that moment where you go, well, hang on, this isn't really working. This isn't kind of like falling out the way that I thought it was going to. And, and then it's really quick and easy to turn around and go, oh, God, what are you doing? How I've done everything right, and I've done all the right things. I did what you asked me to do, and then so often for me on a personal level, it is coming back to that, like, did I listen or did I run off with it? And did I take it in the direction that I thought was the right way to take it? And then actually it's, let's stop, let's backtrack. Maybe I've gone a bit down that road or this road. And I think also God's very good at not telling me too much, because I will do that. And so sometimes I end up in places, or you end up doing things and you go, I did not think this was the plan. Didn't know this was where we were going. But actually it is where we were meant to be going. It doesn't look the way that I expected it to. And so I think as you're outworking a change, having strong expectations, strong thoughts, and strong cause as to where you think it's going to can sometimes derail that process from moving along. And I think constantly I come back to that idea of short accounts. With God, short steps. Like if we've got a process and we're working it out, stepping regularly along the way, saying, God, am I still going the right way? Am I still working out this move in a different way? Or just laying down some of those things that you went, you kind of put them out and you say, God, you've got a vision here, but my vision is this. Are we on the same page here? Because it's so important that we navigate our change with God, not just grab that initial trailblazing idea and go, got it, I'm off. See you later, God. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's one of the challenges that I experience, and I hear a lot as leader in the church and having conversations with people. It's that, how do I know if this change is something that I embrace or something that I push against? Do I fight against this, or do I just trust God for the ride? Or the other can be true as well. Like, it's easy when you're in a time of stability to just think that must be the peace of the Lord. And how do I know when actually I need to push against stability and create change rather than just allow my life to go down that set of patterns? And I think that's one of the hardest questions that people wrestle with again and again, as to how we navigate those moments. And what they look like. Have you had that, Mark? Is that something you resonate with?
That was the one question I was hoping you weren't going to mention generally. Because I've written...
I could see the fear in your eyes, so I thought let's
go for it. Going for the kill. I've written down here, what is something God wants me to pursue and what's something God is saying stop to? Like, I find that question really, really tricky. And I did have a particular, I guess, an experience that meant that's just ongoingly been tricky for me. I had a very tough year, my first year with DHL, in a random warehouse in Huntingdon, and I wanted to leave, and I went back and applied to a job that I'd previously applied to but didn't get in. And I'd gone back there because I thought, actually, no, I think, A, my current situation is bad, and B, that job, it looks like I think it's the right thing. And I remember putting a lot of effort. I mean, it's more than my normal effort into being prayerful, being reflective. Is this what God wants me to do? Because it was a big outlay of time and energy. I went through at least 3 or 4 stages of interviews, of assessment centres. And then even after this very intense assessment day, they came back and said, you haven't got the job. And I went, maybe I haven't got it right. And then they said, but actually, we've got an alternative job within the same organization that we think fits you better. And I was like, oh yeah, obviously, this is what God's calling me to do, because actually there was this route, and they gave me a conditional offer, and I was all set up to do that, and then it didn't materialize. And I just remember thinking, I don't understand, God. And it was a closed door, and this is one of the most closed doors that I've ever really experienced. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I thought I'd really laid my heart out here, God, and said, if this isn't right, stop it now, not like 10 months later after I've finished that whole process. So I think the question's really hard, but what I did kind of, on reflecting on this, just go back to think and say is that there are some things that we are called to do all the time, and we are called to change all the time. Like, that's sanctification, that's becoming more like Christ, isn't it? And I think, we should lean into that change. I think that's obviously quite a different question to calling, but I think, we are all saying that some change is kind of good and that we enjoy it, and I think we do. I don't know whether you think that it's easy for people to kind of lean into that maybe short-term sanctification change or not, because I think we are called to do that, and that's quite simple. We don't have to kind of go, oh, are you calling me to be kind today, God? Actually, no, that's an expectation that we work on our character, and we, work on our principles to become the person God wants us to be. So I don't know how you find about that.
Yeah, I resonate with that, and I think that good change or bad change, God uses change. And I joked earlier about going to the gym, and if you've ever been to the gym, you know that you can only do a certain exercise for so long before you have to change it, otherwise growth stops. Your body reacts to change, and so we need change in our lives to grow, and I believe that God uses all change for us to grow. I'd love to chat a little bit about some of the ways or the principles that we have found that have helped us when we're changing or in a season of change. And the one that kind of first stood out to me was the vital need for hope when the world is changing around us, that we hold on to hope. I think that hopelessness is the biggest danger of our generation, that we can lose sight that God is working and God is moving, and we start to feel like we're in a cave, that it's not going to get better, that things aren't going to work out. And for me, my definition of hope is that Jesus is working on our behalf, even when we least see it. I remember when we started Soul City, we left our jobs in another church. We had enough money to live for 3 months. And it was an enforced change. It was a change that we believed in. It was positive, but it was terrifying in some ways. I remember a mate of mine, Andy, coming up to me and going, "You guys are brave. You're courageous. You got 3 months before you can't feed your kids. That's bold." And when he said that, it surprised me a little bit, if I'm honest, because it didn't feel that way. Because we really sincerely believed that if we got it wrong, if we'd have changed and God didn't want us to change, and that we were doing the wrong thing, that we were doing it with sincerity, that we were doing our best to follow what we believe God would want for this world. And so I said to him, maybe we'll get it all wrong, maybe we won't feed our kids, but I believe that Jesus is with us through this change. And so if we're wrong and we're looking towards him, he will navigate and guide us as we go. And so for me, that idea of hope, that idea of the presence of God working through every day, it kind of made us feel slightly invincible in that we were we don't think that we can get the wrong answer. We don't think we can make the wrong choice, because if we do, we know that he will guide us and he will show us, even if we don't see it right now. So hope was really vital for us in change. What are some of the things that you think you want to say something, Mark?
Yeah, I've definitely got a story or a thing. It feels like story time. I'm just telling you little stories. I hope that's okay. If it's not, I don't know, you can't stop it now, can you? Something that happened to me, which was difficult, was about 18 months ago. My parents chose to separate. So that was obviously a really, really challenging thing for me to go through and to deal with and understand. And if you know me, I like to understand things. I want to pull things apart, and I want to understand exactly why this comes together. But I think when we're talking about hope there, it's so important, and it's and I mean hope, vision, like I see them as quite similar, because I got there was just a clarity of where I am and who I am, that I knew that there was something kind of more important in this than just how this affected me. And so immediately my response to my parents was, and has always been, and now more to them individually rather than to them together, has been that I will always love you, completely unconditional. I'm so indebted to them. They've done so much for me. And I think when you have your own kids, you realize how much you have to do, you have to give to look after your kids, and they'd done that for me. And so it was like instantly I knew there was like this hope, there was this vision that I was just there now to love them. And I was speaking to my mum the other day, and she said, despite these, 12, 18 months of really difficult times, and obviously much further back for her and my dad, she said, I've just noticed that, my relationship with God is better. My relationship with you is much better. My relationship with my older sister is much better. And we, things had changed that were very positive. It doesn't make it painless, obviously. And it's not to belittle any of the things that are going wrong or that are difficult. But it's kind of like when there's something greater at work here, which is like, well, what's God doing in my mum's life? Actually, then you start to get a perspective of things, and you go, actually, might not be easy, but I can lean into this, and I can do what I think God's calling me to do right in front of me. So I think, hope and vision is super important.
I think what's fascinating about those two examples, so they're two very big major changes, but they come from a different viewpoint. One that you choose yourself and that you actively put in, and one that's kind of brought to you as a change. And power dynamics within change are always, a very complex nature. Do we have the power to make the change? Is the change being forced upon us? Is it something that we're having to react to? And I think that they both have their struggles, but quite often the changes that are brought to us that we don't choose, that are sort of laid at your door, and there's nothing you can do. You can't stop that process from happening. The ball is rolling and you didn't start that process. Those ones can be really difficult, because I think, again, hopelessness in those situations, I think, I would see in the same way as if we use the word power. The power isn't yours. It doesn't sit in your hands to stop the process or change the process. You guys, can make decisions to sort of change situations. But once that ball is rolling, it's gone. It's out of control now. And I think that loss of feeling of control in a change is the time when fear can really set in, and where we can really start to feel quite unstable. And changes that try to affect the things that we really hold core as our stability, whether it's the relationship you have with people is where you really find your stableness, whether it's, your church and the way that you express God is something that is really holds your stability in life. Those things that then they get rocked. Some changes we can kind of pass through and it's not too bad. And other ones, even small ones can really rock us to a core. And it's because they're attacking the things that make us feel stable and content. And then we feel the loss of power. And I think what's really amazing in both of these two examples is that you've both expressed a point where you were able to find where you had power within the change, where you had power to affect your own emotional states, where you had the power to affect physical or practical things that were happening. And I think we have a bit of a rule or maybe a value in our family, and it always says that the crisis is not the moment to make the decision. And we always talk about, that the moment that you're in that process and it's chaos, that's not the point we needed to make the decision. We needed to make the decision when the calm was there, even though you don't necessarily know what the change might be or what the crisis might be at that point. But when you have sort of, we have values as families, we have things that we hold as the thing that's core. Like, for us in a family, we have a value that's like, we're open and we're honest with each other. We don't lie to each other kind of thing. And so when we're in a crisis and actually it's really easy to go, do you know what, if I just cover that up, like the crisis could be over. And it's like, but no, our value we made before the crisis was to do that. So that's the action that we can take forward. It helps in those moments to re-find that power. And I think what's so amazing in Mark's story there is that, you know, a massive life-changing event within your family, which is obviously going to be somewhere where stability is felt, you know, really strongly. But to be able to find the way sensitively and carefully that you can affect your world and your situation, how you can regain some stability in that, and then see a positive way of moving forward, that takes a lot. It doesn't happen quickly, I'm sure, you know, and there's a huge amount that we work through in those times. But being able to find that, and I think having, you know, the anchor and the rock of God there for us, having strong and amazing people around us. You know, our small group, we often talk about where are you at? Our community time at the beginning of our small group is so important because we just go, where's your life right now? How's that thing going? Did that job interview go well? You know, just having core people around you who can be that strength as well and hold those arms up when you need it is so important, and help you just navigate where you need to find your place that you can control your little part of your world is good.
Yeah, and I think so. It linked to the story. I think what you're saying there, and it kind of one of the Bible passages that jumped out as we were thinking about this was, you know, that teaching that Jesus did about the sandy land and the rocky land and building a house. So, I guess to recap it as best I can, as simply as possible, there's just a parable that he's sharing of two builders, and one builds his house on the sandy land, one builds his house on the rock, and building on the rock is obviously a lot more hard work and works all day, and then the point is when the rain comes and the storms come, the person who's put their time and effort into building their house on the rock is not rocked by the storm. Their house is not rocked away. The one with the build their house on the sand is. And I guess it linked to this for me because the decision to build the house happens well before the storm, right? It's the decision to build your house upon a rock. And I thought it was the really helpful one for managing change, because I think sometimes we do also just think about what's happening in the change. How do we manage the crisis? If you've built your house on the rock in advance, you sit and you don't necessarily enjoy the crisis, but it's certainly less difficult than the one who's now, lost his house. And we can talk about how to manage when you lost your house. That is an important discussion, but making that decision early on to set your identity, to set your house and your life on the rock gives you that stability for when things do come. So,
yeah, brilliant. I think that's really, really helpful. Okay, and I think just in terms of like making sure that our daily disciplines, our daily, like when we're in the summer seasons, that we're setting things up then, aware for when life gets chaotic, and that's really important. I've got really just one more thing that I want us to just touch on before we then kind of go into some time of worship and response, and that is how do we? So we've talked about hope, we've talked about disciplines, we've talked about not making big decisions in moments of chaos. I think that the last thing that I see quite regularly is that painful moments or decisions that we didn't feel were in our power or control, they can have a habit of echoing for years and years to come. That something like a pandemic can shape a nation for decades, that something like a trauma can end up continuing again and again and again, and it doesn't just end up being one change to navigate, it ends up becoming something which bleeds into the next season. And I think about in the Bible the story of Israel, and they were rescued from Egypt, but Egypt was still inside them. They still thought like slaves even though they'd left. And so I guess the last question I just wanted to talk about is, as you're moving forwards through a season or a time of change, what can we do to make sure that the change changes us for the better and not for the worst, or that anything of the last season that we don't think should continue to the next season stays there? I guess what I'm asking is, what does mourning look like? What does yielding look like? How do we do those things? And what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And I think I think back often to the Easter story. We talked a little bit about this the other day. And Easter is an amazing time, and we have some great reflection. But I love to think back to how that moment would truly have felt if you were right there in that moment. And you had to go through that. I mean, the expectation of what Jesus was about to do, how he was about to change the world, what he was going to do, was so massive. And he did everything he promised to do, but in the absolute different way to the way anyone stood there expected him to do. And you got to Friday and he died. And it's, when we think about Friday to Sunday, that's a huge amount of time. Like, that's hours and hours of sitting there going, what just happened? And Saturday, the Easter Saturday, we quite often forget Easter Saturday, I think. And it's just such an incredible time to think about, of how do we sit in these periods of time between the end of something, every change always has an end and a start and a middle ground. And the middle ground quite often in a change is the hardest bit. The start is the exciting bit, and the end is the mourning point. And on Easter Saturday, people had to sit and decide how they were going to deal with what had just happened. And, as we see, some people ran away, and some people left the city, and some people prayed, and some people, sat confused. And, Mary and the other people prepared, and they got ready. And they went, this is not what I expected. This is not where I thought we were going. This is not anywhere within the remit of what I would have planned or how I would have done it. But I'm still going to trust that God has a plan, that he's promised something, and therefore he's going to do something. And they prepared and they got ready. And obviously we know the Easter Sunday and how, God did everything that he said he would do through Jesus, just in a totally different way. And I often think about that when I come to those roadblock moments where you just go, this is not what I thought. This is not what you promised. This is not, to human people as well as God. Some people promise this amazing change, and we're suddenly like, but it's not happening. And I think that still trusting in the process, particularly with God, trusting his promises, knowing that he is our rock, exactly as you were saying, we can trust, but it may not look exactly as it is. And as a leadership team, we had, and trustee team, we had a prayer meeting the other week about sort of building changes and all that kind of stuff, and just spent some time very powerfully yielding some of the things. We dream, don't we? We have dreams, and we have things that we want to see God do, and sometimes they're fantastic sounding dreams, but are they my dreams? Are they God's dreams? And it just gave us an opportunity as part of the prayer meeting just to yield some of those things that when I think this is what you want us to do, but if it's not, that's okay, let's lay it down. And it was a very powerful thing. It's not something that I'd done in my disciplines before, but definitely something I want to take on board and do more regularly, because I think it's so important just to go, do you know what, God, this is my most precious thing, and I am giving that to you. And if it's you want to give it back to me, and that's great, that's brilliant. But if it's not, and it's just a great dream that I had, I'm willing to give it to you and see what you want to do with it. And that, for me, was something that was really powerful, quite difficult in a lot of cases, but yeah, really good.
That's really good. I think we're gonna stop there. But can we just thank Mark and thank Beth for sharing with us?